Welcome to The Explainer. Now, think about your life for just a second. We make hundreds of decisions every single day, right? We're constantly assessing hazards and rewards. But how many of those decisions are truly, completely objective? Well, today, we're diving deep into behavioral intelligence to uncover the invisible psychology behind our everyday choices.
So, I really want you to consider this. What covert factors influence your risk attitude? We all kind of like to believe we're the conscious architects of our own risk-taking. We assume we weigh the pros and cons, we look at the data, and we make a calculated, logical choice, right? Well, the science of behavioral economics tells a very different story. There are invisible forces, these hidden mental shortcuts that secretly dictate how much risk we're willing to take, often entirely without our conscious permission.
Okay, to really get a grip on these forces, we need to define our terms a bit. Behavioral intelligence is basically the foundational framework for understanding the covert heuristics, or mental shortcuts, that drive our decisions. Think of it as the academic lens that explains why we sometimes act completely irrationally when faced with uncertainty. When we talk about your individual risk attitude, we're literally talking about your unique threshold for stepping into the unknown. But that threshold, it isn't static, it's constantly being warped. So this module is entirely dedicated to uncovering these mental shortcuts so we can finally see the invisible strings pulling at our risk attitudes.
All right, let's dive into the syllabus. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, decoding behavioral intelligence. Then we'll break down 4 specific traps: the availability heuristic, the representativeness heuristic, anchoring and adjustment, and the confirmation trap. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with mastering individual risk.
Section 1, Decoding Behavioral Intelligence and Uncovering the Covert Factors. Let's get into it.
Moving to Section 2, the availability heuristic, or the danger of recall.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it turns the word back on us. The availability heuristic is, well, exactly what it sounds like. A mental shortcut relying on immediate, easily available examples that pop right into your head. You see, if you're trying to assess the risk of a situation, your brain doesn't just, pull up a global database of statistics. No way. Instead, it searches your immediate memory. For instance, if you literally just watched a news report about a plane crash, your brain automatically screams, flying is highly risky, even though you're statistically way more likely to get hurt just driving to the airport. But because that image of the plane crash is vivid and easily available right there in your mind, it totally hijacks your logic. We end up fearing rare, dramatic events because they're so easy to recall, while we totally ignore the common, statistically likely dangers, like, say, texting while driving. So what's mentally available covertly influences our entire perception of risk.
Section 3, the representativeness heuristic, also known as the categorization trap.
Okay, so the representativeness heuristic. This is when we judge the probability of an event by finding a comparable known event and assuming it perfectly represents the new situation. Look, humans are basically pattern matching machines. When we face a new risk, we instantly try to match it to a category we already know. But assuming one thing perfectly represents another, that fundamentally skews our individual risk attitude. Imagine you're interviewing a job candidate who went to the exact same college as your absolute best employee. Your brain immediately pattern matches. It just assumes this new person carries zero risk and will also be a total rock star, which makes you gloss over some pretty vital, unique red flags on their actual resume. We end up ignoring specific, unique data about the current situation simply because it visually or thematically resembles something from our past. It's wild.
All right, Section 4, Anchoring and Adjustment, or the phenomenon of getting stuck.
Let's move to this and see how it builds, step by step. Step 1, the anchor is set. The very first piece of information you receive about a risk acts as an anchor. It drops down and fixes your baseline perception right in place. Imagine you're out looking to buy a used car and the dealer lists it at, say, $20,000. Boom, that is your anchor. Then comes step 2, the flawed adjustment. You negotiate hard, you get the price down to $17,000, and you walk away feeling like you totally mitigated the risk and won a great deal. But what if the car is actually only worth 12 grand? Even though you got new information, your brain really struggled to adjust away from that initial $20,000 anchor. Actually, scratch that. It didn't just struggle. Your entire attitude toward that risk was manipulated by nothing more than the very first random number you were handed.
Moving on to Section 5, the confirmation trap, seeking what we know.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive divide happening inside your mind right now.
On one side, we have confirming evidence. When assessing a risk, our brains actively, almost aggressively, seek out information that supports the risk attitude we've already quietly decided on. On the flip side is contradicting evidence. These are the vital facts, the warning signs, the alternate perspectives, which the trap completely ignores. Favoring confirming information over contradicting facts creates an incredibly dangerous echo chamber. For instance, you might take massive risks you really shouldn't, like dumping your savings into a doomed cryptocurrency project just because a friend made money on it, purposely ignoring all the glaring financial red flags. Or conversely, you might avoid amazing opportunities because you're only looking for reasons to say no, You literally see only what you want to see.
Finally, Section 6, Mastering Individual Risk, putting all the pieces together.
So the crucial point here is understanding these individual heuristics as an interconnected web. They don't just operate in a vacuum, they compound on one another. The availability heuristic tricks us based on what's easy to remember. The representativeness heuristic tricks us through lazy categorization. Anchoring and adjustment traps us with initial info, and the confirmation trap absolutely blinds us to anything that contradicts our existing beliefs. And look, these aren't just dry academic terms. No, they're the exact covert factors actively dictating your individual risk attitude every single day. By recognizing them, you transition from being unknowingly manipulated to actually having true behavioral intelligence.
So I leave you with this provocative thought. Now that these covert factors are exposed, how will your risk attitude change? The next time you face a major decision, maybe a new investment or a sudden hazard, just pause. Ask yourself, am I being anchored by the first number I heard? Am I falling for the availability trap just because I saw a scary headline? Behavioral intelligence isn't about eliminating risk entirely, it's about finally seeing that risk clearly. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.